Thank you for watching Amit Shakil 5858. I am Amir Budnem. GMT 700 March 14, 2024. Both parties agrees to ban TikTok in USA. Haiti is still in chaos. Ukraine drone attack on Russia and Russian warning of atomic attack. Putin opponent attacked in Lithuania. High school student suicide in America. Biden and Trump got nomination from the parties. Trump case in Georgia. Alaskan student. Boeing company in hot water. Hate crimes in Canada. Winter storm for America. Migrant child in Mexico border. Israeli attack in West Bank. I am thankful to all news resources. Now the news from all the world channels. American, Canada, European, Asian and African channels have reported the same news. Local news were different. For example, CNN channel, CGTN channel and Al Jazeera. Now the news in detail.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Navaz in Nogales, Mexico. On the NewsHour tonight, a bipartisan majority in the House passes legislation that could result in a U.S. TikTok ban if its Chinese owners don't sell out.
And it's official. The race for the White House is a rematch of 2020 after President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump clinched their party's nominations.
And the dangerous journey migrant children take, many on their own, seeking safety in the United States.
How did you know where to go or who to go with?
We got to know a group and we started trusting each other and helping each other.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Consumer Cellular, this is Sam. How may I help you? This is Pocket Dial. Well, somebody's pocket.
Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular,
You get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing.
have a nice day.
A successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
the Walton Family Foundation, working for solutions to protect water during climate change so people and nature can thrive together. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. The U.S. House voted overwhelmingly today to pass a bill that could ban TikTok here in the U.S. unless the app cuts ties with China. The bill now heads to the Senate, where its fate is, at the moment, unclear. Last night, we heard from the lead sponsors of the bill about why the legislation is necessary. Tonight, we hear from an opposing voice, and for that, we're joined by David Green, Civil Liberties Director and Senior Staff Attorney at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Mr. Green, thanks so much for being with us. And you, as I understand it, opposed this bill on First Amendment grounds. We spoke last night with the lead sponsors of that legislation, as I mentioned, Congressman Gallagher and Krishnamurthy. And Congressman Krishnamurthy said of China's practices that there's no First Amendment right to espionage. There's no First Amendment right to harm our national security. Why is he wrong, in your view?
He's not thinking about the First Amendment rights of U.S. people who want to use TikTok and their right to communicate with each other through it and to receive information from TikTok in the way they receive it now. U.S. people certainly have a right to use communications tools like TikTok to get information from them and to put out and to use them to disseminate their own information. So I understand that Representative Krishnamurthy is very concerned about the First Amendment rights of China, but that's really not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about the First Amendment rights of U.S. users.
Doesn't China present a special case? The FBI Director, Christopher Wray, said that China is the defining threat of this generation, and the Chinese Communist Party requires Chinese companies to share information and user data upon request. That's the perceived threat that TikTok poses.
Well, that doesn't really make... I defer to the FBI Director on the threat posed by China in particular, but I will note that China is not unique in requiring its companies to provide information to them upon request. The U.S. does much of the same thing through national security letters and through surveillance conducted under Executive Order 12333. There's a whole congressional debate going on now about the proposed renewal of Section 702 surveillance. So the U.S. has many of these same tools. China is not unique among nations in requiring companies located in it to provide internet user data. Now, if China does pose some particular threats, the U.S. can react to it. The question is whether forcing the sale or banning this platform from operating as it currently operates is the properly tailored way of addressing that threat. And what we're saying is that it's not, or at least the government hasn't so far proven that it is. It hasn't talked about this law in terms of the First Amendment scrutiny and the specificity that the First Amendment requires.
So what then would be a more appropriate solution?
Well, there's a few things. One of the reasons it's hard to talk about what a better solution would be is because the justification for this law keeps on changing. Up until yesterday, maybe, those who support this law have been very strongly saying that this law is not about the content on TikTok at all. This is all about just some national security threat that we can't really tell you about. That it's just dangerous for China to have all this data about U.S. users. I think what we saw from your interview yesterday and from a lot of the statements made on the floor today, that this is very much of concerns about the content that U.S. users get from TikTok. We heard this yesterday. I believe Representative Krishnamurthy talked about how in China they get healthy content about healthy living and STEM education, and in the United States it's about drug paraphernalia and over-sexualization. So we know know this is clearly about content. It's very difficult under the First Amendment for the government to restrict content. So if the goal of this bill is to say we don't like the content you're getting, that's a very difficult thing for the government to do.
So if TikTok is forced to divest, how does that infringe upon one's First Amendment rights? Because if I want to post on TikTok, I can still post whatever I'm posting no matter who owns it.
Well, there's two things that could happen, right? One is that it will just shut down. It won't have a non-Chinese owner. That could happen, and those who previously used the site and received information from it wouldn't get that anymore. If they're sold to a U.S. company or sold to other ownership, then that still may affect First Amendment rights because the new owners may have different editorial policies. In fact, it seems like, based on the comments of the sponsors gave on your show yesterday, is that they wanted to have different editorial policies. They wanted to show different content to U.S. users and to treat their content in different ways. So again, that's an infringement on the user's First Amendment rights. So what Congress wants is for them to get different information. They're doing that through having different ownership and different editorial policies. I think we've all seen what a change in ownership can mean for the editorial policies of a social media company and for users' experiences with it and whether they want to engage with that service.
You and your organization have called instead for comprehensive data privacy legislation. How exactly would that work? And how would that solve this TikTok problem?
So again, this really relies on if the problem is a data privacy problem, and this is what some people have said early on to justify the bill, a concern that too much U.S. user data was flowing to the Chinese government, and then that itself represented a national security concern. And we agree that the flow of U.S. user data is a serious problem, not just for national security reasons, but also for individual privacy purposes. But you address privacy concerns by passing privacy laws. What we do not have in the U.S. is comprehensive data privacy regulation that controls how much data companies can collect about their users in the first place, when, to the extent they can retain such data, and how they can share such data. If companies, TikTok or anybody else, were not collecting and retaining and sharing so much data in the first place, you wouldn't need to single out TikTok for such exceptional treatment. It's hard to take Congress seriously about data privacy if they don't pass data privacy laws. If they don't look at how TikTok and other social media companies retain user data, if they don't look at how data brokers then purchase and then redistribute that data to lots of actors, including governments and including our enemies.
David Green with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Thanks for your time and your insights this evening.
Thanks for having me.
In the day's other headlines, a judge in Georgia tossed out 6 of 41 charges against former President Trump and his allies in a 2020 election interference case. One of the dismissed counts involved Mr. Trump urging the Georgia Secretary of State to, quote, find 11,780 votes to overturn the election. But Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee found the charges too broad. He said, quote, the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is fatal. Prosecutors will have the option of seeking a new indictment related to the dismissed counts. In the Middle East, 6 Palestinians have died in clashes across the occupied West Bank. A teenager was killed after he allegedly stabbed Israeli security guards. 3 others were shot dead after Israeli police said they were about to throw explosives. And 2 men were killed during an Israeli military raid in Jenin. Video of the aftermath showed roads torn up by Israeli tanks and bulldozers. Ukraine sent a new wave of armed drones into Russia today, striking at oil refineries. One attack set a large facility southeast of Moscow ablaze. Operations were reportedly disrupted at several other locations. Separately, Russian President Vladimir Putin was interviewed on state TV, and he said again that Russia could use nuclear weapons in Ukraine.
Weapons exist to be used. We have our own principles. What do they mean? That we are ready to use weapons, including any weapons, including those you mentioned, if we are talking about the existence of the Russian state, about damaging our sovereignty and independence.
Putin spoke just days before national elections. He's expected to secure another 6-year term. Officials in Lithuania called out Moscow today after an ally of the late Alexei Navalny was bludgeoned with a hammer. Leonid Volkov was assaulted on Tuesday. It happened outside the home where he's been living in exile. In a video posted online, Volkov appeared bruised and bandaged, but vowed not to be silenced.
They wanted to make me into a schnitzel with a meat hammer right outside my house. The attacker hit me 15 times in my leg. My arm has been broken, but I will live. The most important thing is we will continue working, and we will not surrender. It was another obvious, typical, classic gangster hello from Putin.
The attack came nearly a month after Navalny died in a Russian prison, and Lithuanian officials made clear they think the Kremlin was involved. Moscow denied it played any role. In Haiti, plans for new leadership to rescue the violence-plagued nation appear to be in limbo tonight. Several figures tapped to join a transitional council now say they won't take part. The U.S. and Caribbean leaders had worked out the plan. Current Prime Minister Ariel Henry said he would resign once the council is in place. Here at home, an autopsy report released today concluded that Nex Benedict, a non-binary high school student in Oklahoma, died by suicide last month, a day after a physical altercation in a school bathroom. The report listed a, quote, combined toxicity of drugs used to treat depression and allergies. The incident sparked outrage from gay and transgender rights groups who cited reports that Nex had been a victim of bullying. On Wall Street, stocks mostly drifted on a quiet day of trading. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 37 points to close at 39,043. The Nasdaq fell 87 points. The S&P 500 slipped 10. And still to come on the NewsHour, a family in northern Gaza feeds hundreds of starving Palestinians during Ramadan. The FAA reports dozens of issues with the production of Boeing 737 MAX jets and the impact of America's deep political divisions on marriages, dating, and families.
This is the PBF NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The race for the White House is officially a rematch contest as the 2 most recent occupants of the Oval Office clinch their party's nominations and prepare to face off in a rematch of the 2020 election.
Hello, Milwaukee.
On his first day as the presumptive Democratic nominee, President Biden in the battleground state of Wisconsin, touting his administration's accomplishments.
My predecessor, who failed the most basic duty any president owes the American people, the duty to care, just to care. In my view, that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to uphold the duty that gets us through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. And we have. And now we're building a future America full of possibilities.
The general election matchup is now official.
We're the official nominee of the Republican Party.
After sweeping 4 states yesterday, Donald Trump secured enough delegates to become the GOP nominee for the 3rd election in a row.
We have to get back to work because we have the worst president in the history of our country.
It's a rematch that some voters say they don't want.
I would love to see our country represented not by someone in their 80s who's a white man.
We don't have exceptional candidates right now, so it was a difficult decision.
President Biden won 95% of the vote in Georgia last night and 87% of the vote in Washington state, even as nearly 50,000 Democrats there voted uncommitted. I didn't feel comfortable giving him my support again, so I wanted to vote uncommitted today to send that message that people aren't just going to continue voting for whoever's in office as a Democrat, regardless of the action or inaction that they perform. But other Democrats say the stakes are too high for symbolic protest votes.
I'm voting for Joe Biden all the way through. It really is an important election this year. Probably the most important our country has ever had.
Donald Trump's diehard supporters also see the choice as critical.
I've never in my lifetime seen this economy as bad as it is now, and I'm all for Donald Trump, and I want everybody to get out, and I want a red wave come November. Go out and vote.
The now presumptive GOP nominee will spend at least part of his time in the coming days off the campaign trail. Mr. Trump will be back in federal court in Florida on Thursday, facing charges of mishandling classified documents and obstructing justice. And his hush money trial begins later this month in New York. For both candidates, the focus will soon turn to those few battleground states where the final outcome could be measured in just thousands of votes, in what will be the longest general election campaign in modern history. Let's bring in Doug High. He's the former communications director to House Majority Leader Eric Cantor, and before that, the Republican National Committee. It's great to have you here.
Good to be with you.
So Donald Trump, as you well know, he lost Georgia by fewer than 12,000 votes back in 2020. Nikki Haley last night won more than 77,000 votes, even though she quit the race last week. We should say that a lot of those folks voted early. Georgia has early voting. But a significant number of that vote, that was a protest vote against Donald Trump. How alarmed should the Trump campaign be?
They should take this very seriously. And what we see with this is something I learned the week before in North Carolina. I happened to have been down in Chapel Hill at my alma mater, UNC. We're doing the ACC tournament this weekend. And I went to a Nikki Haley event nearby in Raleigh. And what I saw was a room that was jammed. They had to move it to two separate, larger venues to handle the crowd size. And there's something real going on in that room. And what I saw were a lot of people wearing t-shirts that said permanently barred. Now, some of those people are probably temporarily barred. They'll ultimately vote for Donald Trump. But if you're looking at a state like Georgia, if 20% of those who voted for Nikki Haley decide to not support Donald Trump, well, there's your 12,000 vote margin. It's a real problem for the Trump campaign, and pushing people away is not going to be the answer. You know, politics should be about addition, not subtraction. Whether you're in partisan politics or congressional politics, Donald Trump needs to learn that lesson this week and moving forward.
Well, on that point, I mean, for all of the hand-wringing, Doug, on the Democratic side about Joe Biden's political standing and his poll numbers, Donald Trump has not shown an ability or even a willingness to expand his base of support outside of his people who already support him. I mean, he has an unusually strong floor of support, but he has also an unusually low ceiling of support, and that's problematic. How does he deal with that?
Well, if you look at the polling trend for years now, Donald Trump has been relatively flat, and it's because of, as you say, there's a low ceiling but also a high floor. There's not a lot of places that he can go. What we're going to see Donald Trump do is two things essentially. One, try to start to appeal to some of those voters that he very proactively turned off. Again, you are permanently banned. We don't want you. Always going to say we want you, come and join. How many of those listen are going to be a problem? The other is going to those people who don't like Donald Trump, but also don't like Joe Biden, aren't happy with the direction of the country, and think that Trump is better on a whole host of issues, whether that's the economy and jobs, inflation certainly, and the border. Those issues and a whole lot more. Where Joe Biden is really deeply underwater. You're going to hear Trump talk about those more and more. Problem is, though, he's still Donald Trump. And so he's going to talk about those issues, but overshadow himself by talking about two-tiered system of justice. This judge hates me. That judge is unfair. This woman, that woman, insulting as many people as he can. That turns off those very voters that he needs.
I want to draw on your experience at the RNC because Donald Trump, as you well know, he has cemented his control of the Republican National Committee. The group's members voted to affirm all of his handpicked leaders, including his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, who's now co-chair. It's unusual, not unheard of. Ronald Reagan's daughter was elected co-chair back in 1987. Still, though, with an RNC that is newly organized to support Donald Trump, what does that mean for Republicans who are running down ballot?
Well, I think that's where the concern will be. Laura Trump said, our number one priority is electing Donald Trump. In fact, that's our only priority. Well, if you're running for Senate or governor or House or other offices, you need to be concerned about that. But that's where you have the other party committees, the Congressional Committee, Senatorial, and the RGA, working with the RNC to make sure that money is flowing to states in all directions. So unless you're from North Carolina, with Michael Whatley being the North Carolina State Party Chair and Laura Trump being there, you do have concerns about if money is going to be spent on other activities, whether it's legal bills or what have you, does that come at my expense? This makes the Congressional Committees and the RGA that much more important.
When you look at how the RNC has been hollowed out, mass layoffs, the installation of loyalists, including lawyers who work for him, who helped spread lies about the election, all of that, one of whom has just been named the Senior Counsel for Election Integrity at the RNC, Christina Bobb. What does any of that suggest about the way Donald Trump would govern if he has a second term?
Well, some of that is business as usual. I've never seen a story that talks about Jamie Harrison being a Biden loyalist. Of course he's a Biden loyalist. When you're the DNC chair, you're a loyalist to your party and certainly your president. So a lot of this is very normal and is what happened when Mitt Romney became the nominee or John McCain became the nominee. Some of this, though, a hollowing out of staff does cause concerns. We need to see more about, are they going to be smart with how they now redirect their money? Sean Cairncross is somebody who's come on board with the RNC. He's in charge of making sure the trains run on time and that there's money for those trains. I worked with him. He was at the Senatorial Committee when I worked at the RNC. He is a pros pro and somebody who's going to be very effective in that job. On the issue of election integrity, I think it's interesting. We often hear about polling that shows that voters are concerned about democracy. A lot of those are Democratic voters, of course. A lot of those are Republicans who think wrongly, but think the election was stolen from them. So it doesn't surprise me that Donald Trump is going to hire people who sort of subscribe to that worldview. That's what happens in politics.
Doug High, thanks as always. Great to see you. Tens of thousands of unaccompanied children arrive at the U.S.-Mexico border each year, most coming from Central America. It's a long, often dangerous journey, and Amna Navaz spoke to a group of sisters making the trek alone, and she joins us now from the Arizona border. Amna?
Jeff, that's right. Just yesterday, in a remote stretch of the Arizona border with Mexico, we met three young girls, three sisters. Genesis is 14, Nicole is 13, and little Valeria is just 8. Now, these sisters had just made the 1,500-mile journey from Chiapas in southern Mexico, where they called home, up to the U.S. border. Their mother had actually left years ago. She'd come to the States as a sole provider to support her family. The girls had been living with a great-grandmother who could no longer care for them, so they headed north to reunite with their mother. Here, in fact, is what Nicole told us about that trip.
How did you know where to go or who to go with?
We got to know a group and we started trusting each other and helping each other.
Why did you reach Chiapas in the first place?
Because it's too dangerous. There's a lot of drug trafficking and other stuff.
Jeff, as remarkable as it is to see three young girls who have made that very long, very dangerous journey on their own, these sisters are part of a growing trend officials tell us they are seeing at the U.S. southern border. More unaccompanied minors arriving there. In 2022, a record high of over 150,000. And like other people arriving at the border, they are coming from more and more countries. So we've seen some officials tell us they've seen unaccompanied children arriving from as far away as Egypt, India, and China. Jeff?
And these journeys are incredibly dangerous for anybody, let alone three young girls traveling without adults. What did the sisters you met say about that?
No, the girls in many ways are lucky, Jeff, because they traveled on planes and on buses and then on foot for hours. We connected with their mother. We spoke to her on the phone and were able to talk to her not only to get her permission to speak with the girls, but also to hear what she had to say. She said she felt she had no choice. She had to bring her daughters to her. She told them to stay calm and to stick together. I asked, actually, the youngest girl, Valeria, if she was scared at any point in the journey. Here's what she said.
Was it scary at any time? Was she worried?
No,
¿Por qué no?
¿Por qué no?
¿Por qué no? Because you were with your sister?
Porque estaba con tus hermanos.
Jeff, when we met the girls, they had been out there for hours. They'd long run out of food and water. The humanitarian aid group we were with, the Green Valley Samaritans, offered both, but they were waiting for Border Patrol to come and pick them up as unaccompanied minors. They would be prioritized. I should mention, when we left them, hours went by. Because of some confusion and a lack of Border Patrol resources, the girls somehow got left behind at the wall with a larger migrant group. Night fell, and the temperatures dropped. It is pitch black out there in rough terrain. It's dangerous with the cartels coming through, and the girls in a panic called their mother, who called us. We were then able to call around to our contacts and alert Border Patrol. There were unaccompanied children still out there on the wall. They sent a car overnight to go retrieve them. But all of this just underscores how incredibly precarious this journey can be, even when the girls felt they'd reached safety in the United States. Jeff.
So what happens now, Amna, to those 3 young girls and to other unaccompanied minors who are making similar treks?
Well, for these 3 girls, there is now a multi-agency effort that's been triggered. They'll be passed into HHS custody, which has a system to care and house unaccompanied migrant children. They will vet their mother, hopefully reunite them in the coming weeks. We'll continue to follow their story. But the larger question you ask here is exactly right, Jeff. Is how is the U.S. going to continue to provide and care for what we know are a rising number of unaccompanied children who are now coming from further and further afield? It's just one of the many challenges at the border that U.S. authorities now have to deal with. Jeff?
Amna Nawaz, incredible reporting by you and your team there. We will see you back here tomorrow evening.
Thanks, Jeff.
Today, Israel's top spokesperson for the first time publicly suggested that Israel has a plan to evacuate many of the more than 1 million people who have fled to Rafah in southern Gaza. That comes as the U.S. continues to call on Israel to do more to allow humanitarian aid into the Strip. Nick Schifrin joins us now. So Nick, let's start in Rafah. What plan does Israel have when it comes to attacking Rafah and then moving out of harm's way?
U.S. officials tell me that there is no plan, at least one that has been presented to them. But as you said, Israel's top military Admiral Daniel Hagari said today that they have a plan to evacuate, quote, a significant number of the 1.4 million Gazans who have fled to Rafah. You can see some of the conditions that they're living in right now. And they would be evacuated, Hagari said, to, quote, humanitarian islands in Gaza. Hagari gave no more details than that. And the U.S. officials I speak to, frankly, are very skeptical that this is actually a plan, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken reflected today.
There has to be, if there are going to be military operations in Rafah, a clear and implementable plan to get the civilians out of harm's way and to provide for them once out of harm's way. We've not seen that plan. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but we haven't seen it, and the most important thing is to see it and to make sure that it's something that can be implemented.
U.S. officials I speak to, Jeff, are frankly skeptical that there will ever be a plan that Israel has to evacuate all of those people. But they do believe that Israel is serious about going into Rafah because Hamas's final 4 battalions are in Rafah, and Israel says it cannot defeat Hamas without defeating those 4 battalions, which leads to President Biden's warnings, U.S. officials' warnings about what would happen if Israel goes into Rafah, and what multiple officials I talk to say are considerations. Is that considerations right now of what to do if that happens? Everything from forcible statements to votes in the Security Council to, yes, conditioning the use or sale of weapons to Israel. But again, we're a long way from that happening. Right?
Considerations. Okay, so meantime, the U.S. is still trying to get a hostage deal. What's the latest there?
Yeah, so publicly, all sides say that the talks are stuck. But CIA Director Bill Burns, who's been leading the U.S. effort here, has been in the region trying to find a path forward. And what U.S. officials fear is that Hamas is biding time, essentially hoping that during Ramadan, Israel, whether in Gaza or Jerusalem, makes some move that would inflame Palestinian or Arab opinion and therefore alleviate some of the pressure that is being put on Hamas, especially by Qatar right now. And part of that is that Hamas wants the world, wants the focus of Gaza to be on the humanitarian crisis there.
A humanitarian crisis that is very real.
Very real, especially about food. The UN says all of Gaza's 2.2 million people are in, quote, food crisis, and the UN says 1/4 of Gaza is 1 step away from famine. So as the holy month of Ramadan begins, there is simply not enough food to go around.
There is fasting and there is starving. Many Gazans say they are now doing both. At the soup kitchen in northern Gaza, families struggle for a small pot of soup. Before Ramadan, this was most of these Gazans' only meal, sustenance to stop starvation. During Ramadan, it is the meal that breaks their fast, cauldrons to feed a community.
Israel says it will try to flood Gaza with aid amid growing criticism of the dire humanitarian crisis. It comes as the UN Palestinian Relief Agency said a staff member was killed in an Israeli attack on an aid facility in Rafah. Ukraine carries out more drone strikes deep inside Russia, with oil refineries hit near the Nizhny Novgorod region, east of Moscow. It comes a day after drones hit facilities in Rostov and Ryazan, and as Russia launched fresh strikes on Sumy in northern Ukraine. And the clock is ticking for TikTok. In the US, the House passed a bill that would ban the video app if its China-based owner doesn't sell its stake amid concerns over national security. Good day or good evening to wherever you're watching. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. Israel has said it will try to send vast quantities of aid into Gaza. The statement from Army spokesman Daniel Hagari comes amid growing international criticism of the dire humanitarian crisis, with Gaza's civilians facing the threat of famine after 5 months of war. The military said it would flood the strip with food and supplies, but said getting the aid to those in need remains complicated. On Wednesday, 6 trucks entered northern Gaza, but aid agencies say this, along with international airdrops and an impending shipment via a new maritime corridor, is nowhere near enough. The UN Palestinian Relief Agency, meanwhile, says a staff member was killed in an Israeli attack on an aid facility in Rafah, in southern Gaza. Israel's military said it had killed a Hamas militant in what it called a precision strike. Several others were killed, dozens more injured at the facility. UNRWA said it had shared the exact coordinates of the facility with Israel a day earlier. Henry Nice tells us more.
It was one of the few remaining UN food centres in the Gaza Strip. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees says the Israeli military targeted its aid warehouse in Rafah, killing one of its staff and several others.
It's an UNRWA centre. It's meant to be safe. Some came to work, to distribute aid to the people in need of food during the holy month of Ramadan. Suddenly, they were struck by missiles.
People on the ground are eager to show the aid supplies that were stored at the facility.
Come and see for yourself what's happening. Look.
The UN agency has been accused by Israeli officials of shielding, if not helping, Hamas, and a number of nations, including the US, have pulled their funding from the agency. The UN has launched an independent investigation into the allegations. Over at Rafah's Al-Najjar hospital, relatives have gathered to mourn their loved ones, while doctors rush to treat the wounded. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the Israeli army is investigating the incident.
The Israeli military, the Israeli government have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything possible to ensure that the humanitarians can do their jobs. And among other things, that means making sure that if there's a humanitarian facility that's clearly identified, it's not struck.
In a statement following the strike, UNRWA has detailed the attacks it suffered so far. 165 team members killed, 150 facilities hit, and more than 400 killed while seeking shelter under the UN flag. This latest attack comes as the threat of famine looms over the Strip. A ship carrying almost 200 tons of aid is on its way to Gaza from Cyprus, with hopes the new maritime corridor will mean more food can be delivered to Gazans, as Israeli checks have slowed the flow of trucks from Egypt.
The UN investigation has found that Israeli tank fire that killed Reuters reporter Issam Abdallah in Lebanon last year was in violation of international law. The UN interim force in Lebanon, tasked with monitoring the cross-border fire, concluded that there had been no weapons fired in the 40 minutes prior to the incident, in which 6 other journalists were also wounded. Israel again insisted the tank fired in response to a Hezbollah attack. UNIFIL's findings back those of a Reuters investigation. It's sent its report to the UN in New York. The United States has said it's seen no indications that Russia was ready to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. This after a new bellicose declaration from President Vladimir Putin, in which he said he was ready to deploy them if needed. Meanwhile, Ukraine has carried out more drone strikes deep inside Russia, with oil refineries hit in the Nizhny Novgorod region east of Moscow. It comes a day after its drones hit facilities in Rostov and Ryazan, and as Russia launched fresh strikes on Sumy in northern Ukraine. This report from Catherine Kadiakovic.
Rescuers searched through the rubble for signs of life, pulling out survivors as well as bodies. 15 out of 30 apartments in this building were destroyed by a Russian drone strike overnight, in one of several hundred explosions recorded across the Ukrainian city of Sumy Oblast.
A minute after the strike, I heard a horrible cry from a woman. I later heard that she was pulled out with a child.
While this apartment building in President Zelensky's hometown in central Ukraine caught fire following a Russian missile attack. Meanwhile, Ukraine continued strikes on oil refineries in Russian border regions, one causing a fire at the Ryazan plants.
We will inflict losses on the Russian state in response, quite rightly. They in the Kremlin should get used to the fact that terror does not go unpunished for them.
Russia says it repelled several attempted incursions by Ukrainian-based fighters on Tuesday. President Putin claiming that Ukraine is increasing its attacks to interfere with upcoming Russian elections, escalating his rhetoric to talk of nuclear war.
From the technical point of view, of course we are ready. And our nuclear triad is more modern than any other triad.
Russians will go to the polls this weekend in a presidential election widely regarded as a formality, in which Vladimir Putin is expected to win another 6-year term.
The clock is ticking for TikTok in the United States. This after the House of Representatives passed a bill that would ban the video app if its China-based owner doesn't sell its stake. Lawmakers are concerned that the current ownership structure poses a threat to national security. The social network has 150 million users in the US. Monty Francis has this.
2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed.
In a bitterly divided Congress, a rare moment of bipartisan unity, as the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill on Wednesday, 352 in favor and 65 against. Democrats and Republicans coming together over privacy and national security concerns posed by Chinese-owned TikTok, a wildly popular video-sharing app with some 170 million users in the U.S. alone.
TikTok is a threat to our national security because it is owned by ByteDance, which does the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. We know this because ByteDance leadership says so, and because Chinese law requires it.
The bill would force TikTok's owner, ByteDance, to sell the video app to non-Chinese owners within 6 months or face a ban in the U.S. TikTok's ties to Beijing have been an ongoing source of fear that the app could be used by the Chinese government to spy on Americans or shape their political views. Accusations TikTok denies. The company claimed it has never shared U.S. user data with the Chinese government.
China-based employees routinely access this data, even unbeknownst to employees of TikTok USA.
In response to the passage of the bill, TikTok's VP for Public Policy released a statement saying, "This latest legislation being rushed through at unprecedented speed without even the benefit of a public hearing poses serious constitutional concerns." TikTok has attempted to rally its supporters against the legislation, which now faces an uncertain fate in the U.S. Senate. U.S. President Joe Biden has said he would sign the bill if it reaches his desk. The presumptive Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump, reversed course in recent days, saying he was against a ban on TikTok, claiming it would only strengthen Facebook, which he called an enemy of the people.
There's been yet another mass abduction in Nigeria. Gunmen are reported to have taken dozens of people from Kajuru in the northern Kaduna state, where some 280 students were kidnapped in a nearby village last week. Nigeria's president has ordered security forces not to pay a ransom for the release of those pupils, around 30 of whom are believed to have escaped. Relatives say the kidnappers have demanded large payments for their return. Here's Nigeria's Minister of Information.
Mr. President has said that this is an unacceptable situation. He's not going to, the government will not condone abductions or kidnappings or any kind of criminality in that direction.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the political transition in Haiti is moving forward, despite proposals to install a new leadership appearing to fall apart. It comes after the resignation of Prime Minister Ariel Henry amid worsening chaos and violence in the country over the past 10 days. Gangs control most of the capital, Port-au-Prince, and say Henry's departure will not stop them. Here's Blinken speaking in Washington.
Political transition is moving forward with this interim presidential council, with an interim prime minister, with these new bodies that have stood up, tracking toward elections, and that in turn creates a better environment in which we can actually get assistance in, get it to people who need it, get development moving again, and create some opportunity for people. None of this is easy. None of this is going to happen from one day to the next, but at least there is a plan, a process in place to do that. It's Haitian designed, it's Haitian led, but it's supported by many countries, not only in this hemisphere, but around the world.
Secretary of State also said Kenya's President William Ruto had confirmed that he was ready to send a security mission to Haiti within days once a transitional council is in place. Next, the Dutch far-right firebrand Geert Wilders has failed to garner enough support to form a coalition government after his stunning election win last November. The anti-Islam, anti-immigration politician said he was giving up hope of becoming Prime Minister to facilitate the formation of a new right-wing government. He said on X that his love for his country and voters was bigger and more important than his own position. French Culture Minister Rachida Dati has condemned racist attacks against the French Malian singer Aya Nakamura. Reports that she may sing Edith Piaf at the Olympics opening ceremony have drawn a backlash from France's far right. Here's Catherine Hiddy-Clifford.
Speaking in the Senate, France's culture minister called out racism against the country's most listened to singer, Aya Nakamura.
Beware of using pure racism as an excuse to attack someone, that's all. No, it's not too easy. I've never had it easy, and I never will. I'm simply telling you that attacking an artist for who she is absolutely unacceptable, because it's not a choice, it's a crime.
It began with unconfirmed media reports that the French Malian singer had discussed the possibility of performing a song by French cultural icon Edith Piaf at the Paris Olympics opening ceremony, when she met President Emmanuel Macron last month. This drew a backlash from France's far right. In a photo posted on Saturday, small extremist group The Natives hid their faces as they held up a banner by the River Seine that read, "There's no way, Aya, this is Paris, not the Bamako market." Then at a campaign rally on Sunday led by far-right figure Eric Zemmour, Nakamura's name drew boos from the crowd. The Olympics organising committee has expressed their, quote, shock at the racist attacks. Nakamura herself responded on social media.
You can be a racist, but not deaf. That's what hurts you. I'm becoming a #1 stage subject in debates, but what do I really owe you? Nada.
Many other cultural and political figures have spoken up to condemn the backlash, with some saying the far right's reaction has only made it all the more imperative that Nakamura does perform at the Olympics, an event that transcends borders.
Finally, Spain's parliament is to vote today on a contentious amnesty law that could pardon hundreds of separatists. In November, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez struck the amnesty deal with the Catalan Separatist Party in exchange for parliamentary support. Right-wing critics slammed him for selling out to hold on to power. Among those who could be exonerated, Carles Puigdemont, the self-exiled former Catalan president who orchestrated a failed 2017 independence bid. And with that, we are about done. Thanks for staying with us here on The Night Shift, and see you next time.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Kenya's president reaffirms his country's controversial commitment to send 1,000 police officers to tackle gangs' stranglehold in Haiti. This comes despite an acknowledgement that there will have to be a delay following the Caribbean premier's resignation. Also, Rwanda upholds an election ban on opposition leader and government critic Victoire Ingabire. The fierce opponent of President Kagame spent 8 years in prison before receiving a pardon in 2018, but now cannot run in the July polls. And more kidnappings in Kaduna State in Nigeria this week ramps up fears in communities who feel authorities can do little to protect them. Meanwhile, the families of the 286 students and staff abducted just last week say gangs call demanding over 566,000 euros worth in ransom cash. But first, Kenya's President William Ruto has insisted that his country will still eventually lead a UN-backed multinational police force to help rein in rampant gang violence in the Caribbean nation of Haiti. The commitment is despite the delay of the deployment following the resignation of the Haitian Prime Minister this week. Kenya later acknowledged that Ariel Henry's resignation altered the situation on the ground, as there's no holding government to work with the mission just yet. Our Kenyan correspondent Olivia Bizo tells us more.
It's the latest chapter in the rollercoaster saga. Kenya has said it will not send its security force to Haiti until a new government has been formed. Kenya's President William Ruto had initially made a deal to send 1,000 police officers to the Caribbean nation to help tackle violence over there. But that deal was made with Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry, who on Monday said he would resign. Earlier today, we spoke to an expert who said that the mission will still go ahead, but just later than expected.
That was an agreement between states as opposed to individuals. So we expect that the deployment will proceed at some point. But to expect a transition first before deployment, I think is going to be a wishful thought, in part because the circumstances on the ground are not even good enough to allow for a peaceful transition. And that is why some kind of a multinational force that is neutral is going to be needed.
So when did this whole idea of sending Kenyan police officers to the other side of the world, to Haiti, to help tackle gang violence and insecurity over there begin? Well, Haiti's government appealed for international support 2 years ago, and then in July last year, Kenya's President William Ruto offered his support by sending 1,000 Kenyan police officers to the Caribbean country. And that offer was approved by the UN Security Council a few months later in October. But the mission has been hugely criticised by a wide number of Kenyans, by the opposition and by human rights groups.
These are there for us. Now, Rwandan opposition figure Victoire Ingabire will not be able to participate in the upcoming presidential election on July 15th. After spending 8 years in prison, the main opponent was denied the restoration of her civil rights by judges in Kigali on Wednesday. And so she won't be able to challenge Paul Kagame in the summer ballot. On Saturday, the Rwandan president was designated by his party as the candidate for a fourth re-election. Clement Di Roma tells us more.
Random opposition figure Victoire Ingabire won't be able to run in the upcoming presidential election on July 15th since her civil rights haven't been restored by the judges of the High Court of Kigali. The president of this unregistered party, Dalfa Umurundi, was sentenced in 2013 for conspiracy against the authorities and minimizing the genocide against the Tutsis. After 8 years in prison, she was released in 2018 for a presidential pardon, but remains deprived of certain rights. According to the judges, she does not meet the conditions to regain these rights. Ingabire has stated that this decision is a missed opportunity to establish a real democracy in Rwanda.
If we are in a state where there is no rule of law, do you believe that we can have free and transparent elections? Now this proves that the elections we will have will be exclusive, because if the opposition is always excluded because of the justice system, then these elections are not a sign of democracy. Usually, elections are a sign of democracy.
Victoire Ingabire said that she is considering appealing this decision. According to the opponent, 8 members of the party Dalfa arrested in October 2021 are still imprisoned and awaiting trial. The election on July 15th would have been the first opportunity for Ingabire to run against President Paul Kagame, who was nominated as a candidate for a fourth term by his party, the RPF, last weekend. Facing him, the only declared candidate at the moment is Frank Abineza, head of the Green Party, the only authorized opposition political party in the country.
At least 32 women and 29 men have been reported as kidnapped in northwestern Nigeria. Gunmen reportedly went door to door, taking people from their homes in Tuesday's raid. The abduction from the village in Kaduna State's Kajuru district comes as security forces continue their search for 250 pupils taken last week from a school in Kuruga village, which is in the same state. Troops are still searching forests for the missing students, but President Bola Tinubu ordered security forces not to pay the over €566,000 ransom demanded for their release. The spate of mass kidnappings has undermined Nigerians' faith in the safety of their authorities and of their schools. Over 20 million children are out of education in the country, and the Education Ministry has said that schools are being deliberately targeted by kidnapping gangs.
Unfortunately, what has happened within the country is not a conventional war. It is an insurgency which you cannot predict, and always been targeted to soft spots. And unfortunately, soft spot in Nigeria happens to be educational institution.
Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has directed the opening of Nigeria's land and air borders with the neighbouring Niger and the lifting of other sanctions against the country with immediate effect. The move on Wednesday follows a decision from leaders of regional bloc ECOWAS at an emergency meeting in Abuja last month. Penalties levied against Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea over their recent coups are also due to be lifted at some point. The opening of the borders with Niger, though, will have a big impact on the food crisis currently unrolling in Nigeria itself. That's where our Chinwe Osondo is. She brings us more from Lagos.
The opening of the land and air borders with Niger Republic and the lifting of other sanctions comes in compliance with the decisions taken by the ECOWAS head of state in Abuja on February 24, and also President Bola Ahmed Tinubu approved the lifting of the financial and economic sanctions against the Republic of Guinea. These approvals are very welcome as it will alleviate the level of food crisis both in Niger and Nigeria. Nigeria is suffering from food crisis partly because of the closure of the borders as the inflow of food items from Niger stopped, causing a hike in the prices of food items in the market, and this coupled with the high level of insecurity which has caused a disruption in the farmers' routine up north. The trade activities, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, is a major source of income. This decision simply restores the traders' livelihood. Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf of Kano State had earlier urged President Tinubu to open land borders to enhance food security in the country. Nigeria imported items worth over $33 million in 2022 from Niger, according to the United Nations country database. Niger has exported a variety of grains and livestock to Nigeria in particular. In the nearest future, these decisions should bear fruit, all things being equal.
Chinwe Osondo there for us. That's it for Eye on Africa for now, though. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Following Tuesday's primaries, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump appear set for a rematch in November after both candidates secured enough delegates to win their party's nomination. It'll be the first presidential rematch in the United States since 1956. Biden and Trump both won races Tuesday in Georgia, Mississippi, and Washington State, where over 7% of Democratic voters chose uncommitted as part of an ongoing protest over Biden's support for Israel's assault on Gaza. The European Union's foreign policy chief has accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war by blocking aid from entering Gaza. Joseph Borrell spoke Tuesday.
But this is a humanitarian crisis which is not a natural disaster. It's not a flood. It's not a earthquake. It's a man-made. And when we look for alternative ways of providing support by sea or by air, we have to remind that we have to do it because the natural way of providing support through roads is being closed, artificially closed. And starvation is being used as a war arm. And when we condemn this happening in Ukraine, we have to use the same words for what's happening in Gaza.
On Tuesday, the World Food Programme managed to deliver aid to Gaza City for the first time in nearly a month. The agency said famine's imminent in northern Gaza unless aid deliveries increase exponentially. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, a group of senators led by Bernie Sanders, Jeff Merkley, and Chris Van Hollen are calling on Biden to cut off military aid to Israel if it continues to block U.S. humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. The senators cited the 1961 Foreign Assistance Act, which bars military aid to countries that restrict the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance. Earlier today, at least 4 Palestinians were killed in an Israeli airstrike on an UNRWA aid distribution office in Rafah. Health officials in Gaza say Israeli attacks killed another 88 people over the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll since October 7th to over 31,200, including more than 12,300 children. The UN Relief Agency, UNRWA, says more children were killed in the first 4 months of Israel's assault on Gaza than in all other wars over the past 4 years combined. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces have killed at least 4 Palestinians, including a 13-year-old boy, as it carried out raids on Jenin, Tulkarem, Ramallah, and other cities. According to health officials, at least 427 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank by Israeli forces and settlers since October 7th. Israel's expanding attacks deep inside Lebanon. Earlier today, an Israeli drone attacked a car in the city of Tyre, killing at least 1 person. On Tuesday, a pair of Israeli airstrikes killed 2 and wounded 9 in northeastern Lebanon. Israel also struck areas near the Lebanese city of Baalbek on Monday. Hezbollah responded by launching 100 rockets at northern Israel on Tuesday in what's been described as the heaviest barrage since the war in Gaza began. We'll have more on Lebanon and Gaza after headlines with Rami Khouri. Kenya's announced its halting plans to send 1,000 police officers to Haiti until a new government's in place. The announcement came hours after Haiti's unelected Prime Minister Ariel Henry agreed to resign following an armed uprising against his rule. Caribbean leaders, the U.S. and Canada, have proposed setting up a 7-member presidential panel that would appoint a new interim prime minister. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller spoke Tuesday.
Under the terms of the agreement that was announced yesterday, we expect that the members of the Transitional Council will be appointed in the next 24 to 48 hours, and then they will take the step to appoint an interim prime minister in the near future after that.
Ukrainian drones have attacked 3 Russian oil refineries as part of a major attack on critical Russian infrastructure. Russian forces said 58 Ukrainian drones were shot down overnight. This comes as the Biden administration's announced it'll send a new $300 million weapons package to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said in a new interview Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons if its sovereignty is threatened.
From the technical point of view, of course we are ready. The missiles are constantly combat ready. This is firstly. Secondly, and this is accepted by everybody, our nuclear triad is more modern than any other triad. Actually, only us and the Americans have a triad, and we have advanced much more than them. Our triad and the whole nuclear element is more modern.
Police in Lithuania are investigating an attack on the former chief of staff of Alexei Navalny, the late Russian opposition leader. On Tuesday, Leonid Volkov was assaulted with a hammer and had tear gas sprayed in his eyes outside his home in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. The attack comes just weeks after Navalny died in a Russian Arctic prison. Leonid Volkov spoke to Reuters just hours before the attack Tuesday and directly accused Putin of ordering Navalny's killing.
But in the moment, this dying dinosaur is very strong and can cause enormous damage. That's what we've seen in the last 2 years in Ukraine, and that's what we've seen and the situation of the murder of Alexei Navalny, and we have absolutely no doubt, it's beyond reasonable doubt, that it was Putin's personal order to kill him on February 16th.
The attack on Volkov occurred ahead of this weekend's election in Russia. Volkov and Navalny's wife Yulia have called on Russians to join an election day protest at polling places at noon on Sunday. Special Counsel Robert Hur testified before Congress Tuesday about his report on President Biden's mishandling of classified documents. Republican lawmakers criticized Hur for not filing charges against the president, while Democrats accused him of unfairly maligning the president. In his report last month, Hur described Biden as a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Democrats say a newly released transcript of Hur's interview with Biden shows the president's memory was far stronger than Hur indicated. At one point during the interview, Hur described Biden's memory as photographic. Democratic Congressmember Adam Schiff criticized Hur about his report.
What you did write was deeply prejudicial to the interest of the president. You say it wasn't political, and yet you must have understood. You must have understood the impact of your words.
Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation of the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you did.
That did not happen, Congressman. That did not happen.
In news from Capitol Hill, the House is expected to vote today on a bill that could lead to a nationwide ban on the popular social media app TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. The bill attempts to force ByteDance to sell TikTok or be banned. Backers of the bill claim TikTok poses a national security threat. On Tuesday, a group of lawmakers spoke out against the legislation. This is Congressmember Maxwell Alejandro Frost.
I am highly concerned about our data being collected and being misused by both foreign adversaries and also domestic companies. But this bill does not fix that problem. Let's be honest here. This bill doesn't fix it.
In other congressional news, Republican Representative Ken Buck of Colorado has announced he's leaving Congress at the end of next week in a move that will further erode the Republican slim majority in the House. Florida school teachers will be allowed to discuss sexual orientation and gender identity under the condition the topics are not a part of formal classroom instruction. The clarification came as part of a lawsuit settlement reached by Florida's education officials and a group of LGBTQ plus rights advocates and families. Opponents of Florida's Don't Say Gay law had argued the measure's vague language sparked fear and confusion among educators and students who were unsure if even personal details about their lives, such as drawing a picture of their same-sex parents for a school project, would be a violation of law. And the New York Civil Liberties Union and Palestine Legal have filed a lawsuit against Columbia University for suspending 2 pro-Palestine student groups, Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. The groups were suspended last November after organizing peaceful protests against Israel's occupation and war on Gaza. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez.
On this Wednesday night, TikTok creeps closer to being banned in the U.S. What could happen in Canada?
The crack cocaine of social media algorithms.
One of the men behind the ArriveCan app grilled and on the defensive.
The application was a success.
Why he says he's being harassed and what he refused to disclose to MPs. Attacked. Alexei Navalny's former chief of staff called what happened to him a gangster greeting from Russia's president. And fears for the future of local news.
We're kind of screwed.
How some outlets have found a way to succeed while others struggle.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The noose is tightening around TikTok, a wildly popular video sharing app owned by a company based in China. India and other countries have already banned it. Its use on many government devices, including here in Canada, is already restricted. And today, lawmakers in the U.S. passed a law that will force TikTok's Chinese owner to either sell it or have it banned in the U.S. Jackson Prosco has our top story on why TikTok is being targeted, what comes next, and how Canada could soon follow. We do not want TikTok to be banned.
TikTokers know the clock is ticking.
The bill is passed.
After the House of Representatives moved to ban the app if it isn't sold off by its Chinese parent company within 6 months.
TikTok needs to decide whether they value their users or their ties to the Chinese Communist Party more.
There are fears the Chinese government could access user data or use TikTok to influence millions of Americans.
Is disheartening that they want to take 170 million American voices. This is Summer Lucille with Juicy Body Goddess.
Summer Lucille has 1.4 million followers and a business all riding on the app.
I use TikTok to connect to my community.
She's more worried about her financial security than her data.
As an American citizen, I have a right to be on an app. I have a right my voice to be heard.
Free speech has collided with China's authoritarian government, TikTok, which calls the proposed law bullying behavior, though China already bans American platforms like Facebook.
Hey, TikTok!
Canada would likely follow whatever Washington decides.
This has got to be an area that we work with our closest ally on.
A change in TikTok's ownership won't put to rest fears about its remarkable grip on users.
The crack cocaine of social media algorithms. It is highly addictive. It's spreading stuff that can be very harmful.
In the face of a possible ban, some lawmakers worry just as much about who else ends up owning the app.
So when it's forced to be sold, the question is who will buy it and who will control the data and the speech of 170 million Americans.
The TikTok bill faces an uncertain future in the Senate, but if it does pass, President Joe Biden has already vowed he will sign it into law. Many of TikTok's users say that will influence how they vote in November's election. Donna.
All right, Jackson in Washington, thanks. One of the men who worked on Canada's ArriveCan app says his company has been dragged through the mud with no ability to defend itself. Today, he got his chance. The federal auditor general says his two-man company, GC Strategies, was paid $19 million to create the app, and that the total cost of it ballooned to about $60 million. But the record-keeping was so sloppy, the auditor general couldn't be sure. Abigail Beeman reports on some testy testimony in Ottawa today.
GC Strategies took home millions in taxpayer dollars for ArriveCan, an app plagued in controversy, both financial and glitch-related. But Christian Firth says it's everyone else who got it wrong.
Virtually everything reported about my company in the media and stated about me and my company has been false.
That includes the Auditor General, Firth testified, who said GC Strategies, as the conduit between the government and subcontractors, earned $19 million for ArriveCan. Firth says it was really $11 million, specifying the take-home profit for him and his colleague was $2.5 million. Far more money for far fewer work hours than the average Canadian.
Between 30 to 40 hours every month.
While he fought the AG's findings, Firth admitted it's impossible to ferret out specific costs.
There's another year's worth of billing there, which may not even be in ArriveCan. But again, no one knows if it's right or not because how things are tagged internally.
Firth repeatedly refused to answer questions about who he met with in government, citing a potential RCMP investigation. But he also said the RCMP hasn't contacted him. And he had no comment on the 10,000 people forced to quarantine when they shouldn't have due to a problem with the app, now part of a class action lawsuit.
I think our work was done very well, and I feel like the application was a success.
This is an unacceptable situation. There need to be significant changes. A report will now be sent to the House of Commons about Firth's refusal to answer questions. He stuck to that position after consulting with his lawyer, who was with him in his virtual location, citing medical notes and undue stress. Firth was upset he had to testify in a televised format. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
In Alberta, two political leaders who rarely see eye to eye met face to face. It's the first time since last summer that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Alberta's Premier Daniel Smith have met. They were all smiles for the cameras. They talked about collaborations on several fronts, including nearing completion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. On federal carbon pricing, though, there was nothing to agree on. As Heather Yorks West reports, plans to increase the carbon tax on April 1st are facing opposition from a growing number of premiers.
The moment was cordial, if a little cold. In their first face-to-face meeting in months, Canada's Prime Minister and Alberta's Premier had plenty to discuss.
An area where we don't quite see eye to eye, the carbon tax.
Alberta's opposition to the price on pollution is nothing new, but with the tax slated to jump 23% on April 1st, Smith is also far from alone. On Tuesday, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey, a Liberal, posted a letter on social media asking the federal government to postpone the increase. Furey joining 6 other premiers across the country, now making that call.
If they don't start putting money back into people's pockets instead of filling their pockets, guess what? They're going to get annihilated, as I said before. They're done. Like dinner.
I think what we're seeing happening right now is a bit of momentum building against the tax. To increase a tax at a time that is under so much fire is a really difficult thing to justify.
Though following his meeting with the Alberta Premier, the Prime Minister certainly tried.
My job is not to be popular. My job, although it helps, my job is to do the right things for Canada now and do the right things for Canadians a generation from now.
Trudeau maintains most families will get more back in federal rebate checks than they'll ultimately pay out of pocket.
There has to be a sense of understanding or sensitivity to what people are struggling with.
With prices rising on everything from housing to groceries, an April 1st hike on the price of carbon may be more than the federal Liberals can politically afford. Heather Yorks West, Global News, Calgary.
Plans to install new leadership in Haiti appear to have stalled. Some political parties are reportedly rejecting a proposed presidential council that would be involved in the transition to a new government. American officials say they are still expecting a transitional council to be formed in the coming days. That would pave the way for a long-delayed UN security mission led by Kenya to deploy to Haiti. On the ground, everything is taking far too long. Mike Armstrong spoke to some Haitian Canadians who say time is running out for their loved ones back home.
I cannot imagine what the people are going through.
There is pain in every call. Haitian Canadian France André says each phone conversation with friends and family in Haiti is hard. Whether it's the bullet sounds in the background, stories of murders, or the begging for help.
We don't know what to tell them. They are crying. Really crying. Alphonse, get me out of there.
It has been months of chaos. The resignation Monday, the unpopular and unelected Prime Minister may help, André says, but new elections are needed. The question is how to get there. The solution, André says, can't be imposed by the international community.
Let Haitians take care of Haitian issues. Yes, you want to be help, but let us choose who want to be elected.
Yeah, you're ready. Paul Toussaint has the same painful conversations. Toussaint runs a restaurant in Montreal this morning, spoke to an old colleague in Port-au-Prince.
This guy today, after match 2, they can go to do their job, they can go to work. Since that, how are you going to feed your kids right now?
Now, gangs have grown in recent years. What were once small groups of mercenaries, Toussaint says, have become armies. If the international community wants to help, he says, it should reinforce the outmanned and outgunned Haitian police.
The first thing to do is destroy the gangs. Show them they don't have power.
The plan for a new transitional council to lead Haiti is supposed to exclude people involved in gangs, but it does include many of the same political players and parties who've been in and around power before. The fact the council is being created behind closed doors outside Haiti isn't sitting well either.
You don't just go doing your meeting and decide for Haiti without Haitian. We don't want to repeat what you've been doing.
André says too many mistakes have been made in Haiti and repeated, something that has to stop. The country, he says, right now is hell, and Haitians are finding out how deep hell can go. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
A longtime ally of the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been attacked outside his home in Lithuania and calls what happened to him a gangster greeting from Russian President Vladimir Putin. Leonid Volkov survived, but just hours before he was attacked, he said in an interview that he knew his life and the lives of others who worked with Navalny are in danger. Crystal Demansing reports.
We know that Putin does not only kill people inside Russia, he also kills people outside Russia.
Haunting words from Leonid Volkov. Just hours after speaking to the Reuters news agency, Volkov was beaten with a weapon and pepper sprayed steps away from his home in Lithuania, where he lives in exile. Volkov was chief of staff for Alexei Navalny. The political prisoner and anti-corruption activist died February 16th in a Russian penal colony. Like Navalny's death, many are blaming Volkov's attack on the Russian president. Elections are just days away, and by all accounts, Vladimir Putin will win again. Navalny's widow wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post likening Putin to a mafia boss, asking, why do fairly elected world leaders put themselves on the same level as a criminal who has for decades falsified elections, killed, imprisoned, or forced out of the country all of his critics? Lithuanian police are investigating, and the country's president commented on the brazen but all too familiar assault on a Kremlin critic. The authorities will assess, investigate, and hopefully find the guilty persons. And I can only say one thing to Putin. Nobody is afraid of you here. In the interview he gave before he was assaulted, he talked about being determined to carry on exposing Russian corruption while acknowledging the risk he and others face because of their work. Bandaged and back home, he posted this message on social media. They wanted to make schnitzel out of me with a meat hammer. He goes on to say, it was another obvious, typical classic gangster hello from Putin. Following in Navalny's footsteps, Volkov urged supporters to continue working against Putin and says, we will not give up. Bristol Gamancing, Global News, London. The European Parliament has approved the world's first piece of comprehensive legislation to constrain the rise of artificial intelligence. The AI Act provides far-ranging rules to protect citizens from the potential risks of advanced tech like generative AI, while also promoting innovation. The European Union started working on the legislation after GMT appeared in late 2022. The law's creators say it will make artificial intelligence more human-centric. Sea surface temperatures have reached another grim milestone. Today was the 365th straight day of record ocean warmth. On March 13th of last year, surface temperatures broke into record territory and haven't turned back. They've been hovering about a quarter of a degree warmer than any other year. Among the consequences, another coral bleaching event on the Great Barrier Reef, the 5th in the past 8 years. Experts say the damage this year may be the worst yet, extending to the most southerly portions of that reef. Troubling trend coming up. What could be fueling Canada's rise in hate crimes? There's troubling new data about hate crimes in Canada, people being targeted or attacked because of their race, religion, ethnicity, disability, or sexual orientation. New numbers from Statistics Canada reveal that in 2022, police reported hate crimes went up 7% in Canada. The majority were non-violent, but violent hate crimes, which include assault and uttering threats, did go up by 12%. Mike Dorley breaks down those numbers and what experts say could be driving the increase.
We can't air most of what is being yelled at these pro-Palestinian demonstrations. The vitriol is aimed squarely at Israel, or anybody who identifies as Jewish. Anti-Zionist Jews here! International affairs expert Casey Babb, who just returned from an anti-Semitism conference in Chicago, says recent events in Gaza have fueled the hate that already existed in chat rooms online.
And these groups and these echo chambers give people a sense of meaning, they give people a sense of purpose, and they validate some of their nefarious views. And it's really bad right now, and I don't remember a time in my lifetime where it's been so intense.
As bad as it is right now, the surge in hate crime started long before October 7th. In fact, from 2019 to 2022, the number of hate crimes reported in Canada rose a staggering 83%. What happened? Well, in 2020, the origins of COVID in China fueled a spike in anti-Asian crime. The next year, it was Islamophobia in the headlines after a man targeted and killed a Muslim family out for a walk in London, Ontario. And last year, more gender-based attacks were reported as transgender and LGBTQ issues began trending. The haters, says Barbara Perry, are always looking for a scapegoat.
If I hear one more time, hate has no place in, name your community. Okay, so what are you doing to ensure that it doesn't have a place? Clearly it does. It's there.
It was certainly in Toronto last week. Police say this man was motivated by hate when he discharged a nail gun at a protest, an incident that won't show up in federal crime data for another 2 years. Mike Dorley, Global News, Toronto.
Reading the future ahead, are Saltwire's money woes a sign of bigger problems for media outlets in Canada?
I've been a miner for a heart of gold.
Canadian singer Neil Young is back on Spotify 2 years after he pulled his music off. He complained that podcaster Joe Rogan was spreading vaccine misinformation on Spotify. Then Rogan signed a deal with other platforms, and now Young says services like Apple and Amazon are serving the same disinformation he opposed at Spotify, and he can't sustain a boycott against all the streaming platforms. Atlantic Canada's largest media group is tens of millions of dollars in debt, and it's seeking protection from its creditors. Court documents claim Saltwire, which publishes many of the local and provincial newspapers on the East Coast, has been mismanaged for years, and has many wondering what the company's future looks like. As Heidi Petrachik reports, the media industry is facing unprecedented challenges.
That's kick somebody in the body.
It's been a long time since newspaper sales alone have been enough.
I haven't bought one for 3 weeks, maybe.
The revenue model that supported news organizations for many decades, collapsed basically in the digital era.
Like so many, Atlantic Canada's largest media group pivoted to online news years ago. But since then, they've seen downsizing and layoffs, and now the company is seeking creditor protection.
But in the case of Saltwire, there's a separate issue, I think, and that is mismanagement, a bad vision to start with, and then they sort of, ran it into the ground, if you like.
A private debt fund claims Saltwire owes them more than $32 million. The owner of this newsstand knows all too well the news business has been struggling.
It's troubling, that's for sure.
Numbers from the Local News Research Project show over the past 16 years, out of 518 local news operations that closed in Canada, 437 were daily and community newspapers. 120 papers shifted to online only, and there were just 77 new starts. For editorial cartoonist Michael Deatter, there's more at stake than just a big part of his salary in a time full of mis- and disinformation.
If we relied on just social media to do the same job that professional journalists have been trained to do, we're kind of screwed.
It's not far-fetched to think there may not be a print version at some point down the road.
Longtime journalist Stephen Cook once worked for Saltwire and says part of the answer may lie in getting back to basics.
There are local news entities that, have doubled down on original, self-generated content that you can't get anywhere else, and they're thriving.
Saltwire says it will continue to operate. What that future will look like is a story yet to be written. Heidi Petrachik, Global News, Halifax.
The Man and the Iron Lung next. What we could all learn from Paul Alexander's remarkable life. Life is full of ups and downs. The trick is how you cope with them. Well, a man named Paul Alexander, who got sick with polio as a child, found a way to cope for more than 70 years using an iron lung, a huge mechanical respirator, to keep him alive. He died this week at the age of 78.
I had goals and dreams.
Despite being paralyzed from the neck down and confined to an iron lung for the bulk of his life, Alexander inspired millions. This TikTok video got more than 56 million views. When he got polio at age 6 before there was a vaccine, Alexander was nearly fully paralyzed and close to death. The iron lung kept him breathing. He learned to leave it for short periods, teaching himself to gulp down air. He finished school, got a law degree, and began to paint. He worked as a lawyer for years, wrote a memoir by using a stick to tap keys on a keyboard. It took him 8 years, and he got engaged. He was among the last polio patients to use an iron lung. Doctors never expected him to live so long. His story, he said, is an example of why your past and even obstacles don't need to define your future. And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Otter Lake in Huntsville, Ontario. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to us. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Tonight, breaking news, the House votes to ban TikTok here in the U.S. Democrats and Republicans, more than 170 million TikTok users here in the U.S. Will the Senate now follow suit? Also tonight, word coming in, a young man, a student pilot on a passenger plane, trying to get into the cockpit 3 times in midair before being restrained. First tonight, the future of TikTok in the U.S. The House votes to ban it unless the Chinese company that owns it sells it. The concern here in this country over national security. And with TikTok fighting back tonight, what does TikTok look like in China? Why are there far more restrictions and protections in China for young people on TikTok than here in the U.S.? And tonight, what will the Senate now do next? Rachel Scott live on the Hill. The breaking headline from Georgia, the judge in the case against Donald Trump, dropping 6 charges, 3 of them against Trump. 10 charges against Trump remain, with the judge's decision now in the future of DA Fani Willis coming at any time. Tonight, the scare on board a passenger jet flying from San Diego to Washington, D.C. That young man, a student pilot, trying to breach the cockpit multiple times. What they had to do to restrain him. Tonight, he's facing federal charges. Also tonight, another United Boeing jet with the problem, the 5th issue in about a week. A flight to the U.S. turning back. What was seen leaking from the plane. And news tonight in that Boeing case, the door that came off at 16,000 feet. The video of the workers working on that door erased. Tonight, images coming in now. The massive landslide in Los Angeles. Several homes damaged, residents evacuated. And the new and major winter storm we're watching tonight. Several states on alert. The warnings and watches already. Denver tonight bracing for more than a foot of snow, up to 16 inches. And severe storms from Texas all the way up to Chicago. Then moving into the Northeast. Rob, timing it out. Tonight, the danger in Haiti. The U.S. now deploying U.S. Marines, an anti-terror team to protect the U.S. Embassy in Haiti. Armed gangs surrounding the capital and the evacuations, including famous author Mitch Albom, who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. What he's now saying tonight, our interview just in. Back in the U.S., the college quarterback arrested tonight during spring break. Actress Olivia Munn revealing her personal battle with breast cancer tonight. And the ABC News exclusive, Robin Roberts with actress Christina Applegate and Jamie Lynn Sigler. Both are battling multiple sclerosis. Tonight, their fight against MS and their fight to help others.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, it's great to have you with us here on a Wednesday night. Word coming in tonight that scare on a passenger flight, a young man, a student pilot, trying to breach the cockpit multiple times, and the news from Georgia involving some charges dropped against Donald Trump. But we do begin tonight with the heated battle over the future of TikTok here in the U.S. 170 million users here in this country. Tonight, the House, by an overwhelming majority, Democrats and Republicans, passing a measure to ban the Chinese-owned app here in the U.S. unless TikTok is sold to an American company within 6 months. The move sparking strong reaction from TikTok users, some protesting outside the Capitol, many arguing it's not just dancing videos and viral clips. Some say it's their livelihood, their business. TikTok fighting back tonight, a heavy lobbying effort on the Hill. But tonight, why does TikTok look so different in China than it does here in the U.S.? Why are there more restrictions, more protections for young people in China than in the U.S.? And if U.S. social media is banned in China, many are now asking why allow a Chinese company to have such a large and influential presence here? Rachel Scott leading us off from the Hill tonight.
Tonight, the House overwhelmingly voting to ban TikTok, the wildly popular social media app, unless it's sold by its Chinese parent company ByteDance. Lawmakers responding to concerns, TikTok poses a national security threat and compromises the data of its 170 million American users.
This bill therefore forces TikTok to break up with the Chinese Communist Party.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe. A winner. A winner.
The FBI and top intelligence officials sounding the alarm, warning the Chinese government could use TikTok to access Americans' personal information.
The problem is their ability to manipulate you. They already manipulate your algorithm based on what you like. And that can be innocent. All social media companies do that to try and tailor your feed. But it's a problem when the person in charge, the entity in charge of manipulating, can be an adversary like the Chinese Communist Party.
TikTok denies those allegations, but lawmakers now warning TikTok could interfere in the election.
The risk in terms of propaganda, the risk to influence our election are just too severe.
In China, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are banned completely, and the version of TikTok available over there is much different from what we get here. Listen to how a former Google executive described what kids see on the Chinese version of TikTok in an interview with 60 Minutes.
They show you science experiments you can do at home, museum exhibits, patriotism videos, and educational videos. And they make their domestic version a spinach version of TikTok, while they ship the opium version to the rest of the world.
TikTok pushing back hard. A fierce lobbying effort on Capitol Hill. Online, users enraged.
I'm literally shaking thinking about the possibility of this.
President talked about this before, sure. This time, it's serious.
We spoke with Brandon Hurst, who uses TikTok to promote his plant business.
My whole business would be devastated. I would lose the opportunity to connect with millions of people on a regular basis, and the community that I've worked really hard to build would be gone.
How much of your sales are driven from TikTok?
100%.
President Biden recently launched his own campaign TikTok to meet young voters where they are. But he says if this bill lands on his desk, he will sign it.
If they pass it, I'll sign it.
As president, Donald Trump once tried to ban TikTok by executive order, but now he's against the possible ban. He says it would help Facebook, which he's railed against. But Trump's change in tune also comes after he met with a top Republican donor who has a major financial stake in TikTok's parent company.
A lot to track there as well. Let's get right to Rachel Scott live up on the Hill tonight. Rachel, you heard the president there in his campaign. Obviously, they're on TikTok as well, as you pointed out, trying to reach younger voters. But the president very clear. He says he's ready to sign this bill if the Senate passes it as well.
Yes, David, and even with the president's support, there are no signs that the Senate will move quickly. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says they only plan to review this legislation, and tonight, China responding, blasting this move, insisting that it will only backfire on the U.S. But again, David, the version of TikTok that's available in China is largely educational and far different from what's available here in the U.S. David.
A lot of strong opinions, but that's a very important point, Rachel. Thank you. We turn now to the breaking news from Georgia tonight in the case against Donald Trump and several alleged co-conspirators. Tonight, the judge with an unexpected ruling, throwing out 3 charges against Trump. It comes as that same judge is now set to decide the future of DA Fani Willis in this case, a decision that could come as early as tomorrow or Friday. Here's our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katursky, tonight.
Tonight, all eyes on one judge in Georgia who's expected to rule this week on whether Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis should be removed from Donald Trump's election interference case. But today, the judge handing down a surprise decision and a setback for prosecutors, throwing out 6 criminal counts against the former president and some of his co-defendants. One of those counts involves Trump's phone call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, urging him to find the votes Trump needed to win.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Prosecutors seized on that call to charge Trump with soliciting a public official to violate his oath of office. But today, Judge Scott McAfee ruled they failed to include sufficient detail and did not give the defendants enough information to prepare their defenses intelligently. Judge McAfee used similar reasoning to dismiss charges that Trump and some of his co-defendants pressured public officials to call a special session of the state legislature and decertify the election results. The opinion impacts the cases against not just Trump, but also his former chief of staff Mark Meadows, his one-time lawyer Rudy Giuliani, and 3 other defendants. The judge gave prosecutors 6 months to decide whether they want to refile those dropped charges, addressing his concerns. And that phone call with the Georgia Secretary of State will still play a key role in other parts of the case. The former president, who had been facing 13 counts in Georgia, now faces 10, including the most serious one, racketeering. He's pleaded not guilty.
The judge is now set to rule by Friday, David, whether to disqualify the DA. He's weighing whether her relationship with the prosecutor she hired to help run the case poses an actual conflict of interest or merely just the appearance of one. David?
Aaron Petersky following all this for us again tonight. Thank you. We're learning more at this hour about a scare on board a passenger jet from San Diego to Washington, D.C. A young man, a student pilot, allegedly trying to breach the cockpit multiple times. Tonight we have learned off-duty officers who happen to be on board stepping in to restrain him. Here's ABC's Mola Lengi now.
Tonight, a 19-year-old student pilot is facing federal charges after allegedly trying to breach the cockpit while he was a passenger on an Alaska Airlines flight from San Diego to Washington, D.C.
He attempted to access the flight deck 3 times.
According to an affidavit, Nathan Jones allegedly got out of his seat multiple times and made 3 separate attempts to open the cockpit door before flight attendants called for help from 8 off-duty officers who happened to be on board. They restrained Jones in flex cuffs until the 737 landed.
He was just very confused, but then he would not listen to taking the seat, and after many repeated attempts, then they decided to just put the plastic cuffs on him.
When flight attendants allegedly asked Jones why he did it, he said he was testing them. Agents who searched his belongings found his student pilot's license and notes on how to operate an aircraft.
Well, Jones is charged with interfering with a flight crew. His family says he has no history of violence, and they're calling for a mental competency exam, saying it'll prove he never intended to harm anyone, David. Mola Lengi tonight. Mola, thank you. Meantime, tonight there has been another United Boeing jet with a problem, the 5th issue in about a week now. This time in a Boeing 777 on its way to San Francisco. This is the video tonight of what looks like smoke right there into the right engine. That is actually hydraulic fluid leaking from the landing gear. The passenger jet was forced to turn around. And it comes tonight amid a new headline in the case of that Boeing jet, the door coming off at 16,000 feet. The video of the workers working on that door was erased, automatically wiped clean after 30 days. Here's Trevor Roth.
Tonight, watch as moments after this Boeing 777 takes off in Sydney, hydraulic fluid is seen leaking from the landing gear. Plane carrying 183 passengers and crew heading to San Francisco Monday, turning around less than an hour into the flight, landing safely back at Sydney Airport, met by fire crews. It's the 5th incident involving a United Boeing plane in recent days, following this engine fire and this wheel falling off a jet during takeoff last week. And all this comes amid the investigation into that door plug that flew off an Alaska Airlines flight at 16,000 feet. Today, the NTSB says Boeing hasn't given them all the information they need. Officials telling the Senate Commerce Committee, we still do not know who performed the work on that door plug, and that Boeing has been unable to find the records documenting this work. The NTSB also says security footage had been overwritten as part of standard procedure.
We asked for security camera footage so we can understand who did the work. All their security camera footage is erased within 30 days and overwritten.
In a statement, Boeing says we will continue supporting this investigation in the transparent and proactive fashion. The company promising changes to its safety procedures, including added layers of inspection.
And David, on that fuel leak in Sydney, United says the plane returned due to a maintenance issue. Passengers were rebooked on a later flight. David, Trevor Roth with us again tonight. Trevor, thank you. We turned out the major winter storm tracking at this hour. Heavy snow, damaging winds, heading right across the country. Multiple states on alert already at this hour. California, to Montana, to New Mexico, Denver, expecting up to 16 inches of snow from this. Then Texas up to Chicago, then right into the Northeast by the weekend. Senior meteorologist Rob Marciano timing it out for us. Hey, Rob.
Hi, David. Denver gets some of the biggest snowstorms in the month of March, and well, here we are. Winter storm warnings are posted there. We've got high wind alerts back through California. This storm's going to draw out, but the heaviest snows will be just east of the divide, 2 to 3 feet there, maybe over a foot in the western suburbs of Denver. Severe weather ahead of us. We've got watch boxes up for Kansas and parts of St. Louis till midnight, and then tomorrow that expands greatly. We're looking for the rain to rapidly push into parts of Chicago while still snowing in Denver, and then look for severe weather, maybe some tornadoes across Little Rock, and then rain here in the Northeast on Friday.
David, Rob Marciano with us. Thank you, Rob. And from California tonight, the images coming in, a massive landslide taking out multiple homes in Los Angeles and Sherman Oaks. At least 3 homes damaged, one of them under construction at the time. You can see part of the back of this home sheared off. Residents of other homes had to be evacuated. No one was hurt. It does come after months of record rains there. They're now bracing for winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. We turn tonight to the danger in Haiti. We have been reporting here on the spiraling chaos in Haiti, gangs surrounding the capital. Tonight, the U.S. now sending in Marines, an anti-terror team, to protect the U.S. Embassy. And news of evacuations, including famous author Mitch Albom, who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. We spoke with him just a short time ago. Matt Rivers again tonight.
Tonight, with Haiti in chaos, 4 Army helicopters flying an elite group of dozens of U.S. Marines into Port-au-Prince to reinforce security at the U.S. Embassy, days after the military evacuated some American staffers before the sun came up. Thousands of Americans, like missionary Miriam Sinodi and her group, trapped and desperate to escape.
They can come and get some, they need to come and get all.
With gangs controlling the city, veteran-led rescue group Project Dynamo saying they're headed to Haiti to try and help evacuate American citizens caught in the violence. 2 members of Congress also organizing a private evacuation of 10 Americans out of Haiti that included best-selling author Mitch Albom, who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. Albom and his team saying goodbye to the children at the orphanage his charity runs, saying he's luckier than so many others still there amidst the violence.
When we came over the Haiti airspace to the Dominican Republic and they said, okay, we're clear of Haiti airspace, my wife and I were kind of hit with a very deep pang of sadness because our kids are still there and our staff is still there.
But for the vast majority of Americans there, like Jill Dolan, they can't escape, calling on the U.S. government to begin evacuations.
Every day I wake up thinking, Lord, please send us a chopper. Please send us an airplane that's going to come and rescue us today.
And David, Port-au-Prince calm for now, but that violence could spike at any moment, which would of course make any potential evacuations that much harder.
David, Matt Rivers in the Dominican Republic for us. Matt, thank you. When we come back, the college quarterback arrested on spring break tonight in trouble twice within 30 minutes. And the Robin Roberts exclusive tonight, sitting down with actress Christina Applegate and Jamie Lynn Sigler, both battling MS and both opening up right here tonight. Tonight, the college quarterback arrested on spring break. University of Southern Mississippi quarterback John White arrested at a resort in Destin, Florida. The sheriff's office says he was cited for underage possession of alcohol on the beach. Police say the 19-year-old quarterback was then arrested, found with alcohol again 30 minutes later. When we come back here tonight, actress Olivia Munn this evening revealing her personal battle with breast cancer, and Robin Roberts with Christina Applegate and Jamie Lynn Sigler and their fight against MS. To the Nixon tonight, actress Olivia Munn has revealed her battle with breast cancer, posting images on Instagram. She was diagnosed in April. She underwent 4 surgeries, including a double mastectomy. She credits her doctor for the early diagnosis. She said a routine mammogram 2 months earlier didn't reveal it, but that the doctor still calculated her risk assessment, which then led to more testing. When we come back here tonight, Robin Roberts with actress Christina Applegate and Jamie Lynn Sigler, both battling multiple sclerosis, and the deeply moving interview moment.
ABC World News Tonight with David Muir, sponsored by Vyvgart and Vyvgart Hytrulo.
Finally tonight, Robin Roberts with Christina Applegate and Jamie Lynn Sigler, both are battling multiple sclerosis, and both are helping others, launching a new podcast called Messy.
After 4 decades in the spotlight, Christina Applegate, with good friend Jamie Lynn Sigler by her side.
She's doing this because I have the tremors.
Well, because I love her.
Candid about her life since being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2021. Do you feel the love, Christina?
I mean, yes. I live kind of in hell.
That raw honesty, infused with humor, carrying her through. When we saw you last at the Emmys presenting, and I can I just say the emotions that I felt when you came out on that stage.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. You're totally shaming me with disability by standing up. It's fine. Okay.
Were you able to take in the moment?
Yeah, I actually kind of blacked out. And people said, "Oh, you're so funny," and I'm like, I don't even know what I said. And I felt really beloved, and it was really a beautiful thing. Then I'm just gonna say this: that ought to get stood up for everybody. Come on.
Jamie was starring in The Sopranos when she was diagnosed with MS at just 20 years old. The two have bonded over their shared disease, supporting each other through its unique challenges.
For so long, I've been celebrated for being the strong one and the positive one, that it felt like I was not that if I would admit that some days were hard. But she has really pushed me to be able to say that, because I thought I was letting people down if I would talk about how hard it was sometimes.
I was kind of putting on a little act for everybody for so long, and I just thought that was easier. Be light, be funny, be light. Don't make people feel uncomfortable, and I don't care.
Well, Christina Applegate, it's nice to finally meet you.
Again, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Nice to finally meet you.
We are pulling for Christina and for Jamie and for the so many who are battling MS in this country. More of Robin's moving interview later tonight on Nightline. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you for making World News Tonight with David Muir, America's most watched newscast.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amish Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Goodnam. Have a good life.